And once again, welcome everyone. We have gathered for the first 15 minutes. We are now going to have our panelists join us. And I'm going to remind people that even though we are going to be controlling the video and audio of all our participants, we are going to ask you to not unmute yourself and not turn your video on at this time, unless you are one of the panelists. So let's bring our panelists in. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Very good.
Great. So we are all set, ready to go. As we can see, we are broadcasting from the 4th floor of 320 Newbury Street. And we are not only broadcasting to Zoom and to Discord, we are also broadcasting to our computer labs, also on this floor. It is a calm Friday night at the BAC at this time, but we genuinely hope to create some FOMO around these events. So I believe my panelists agree that people should be excited about these events and come to them, whether they are here at the BAC, whether they are logging in via Zoom or checking it out on the BAC DME Discord server. Now, I also want to give a huge shout out to Cassia, who is here representing, most importantly, AIAS, who is in collaboration with this event with DME, Digital Media Education at the BAC. And Cassia, if you want to give us a wave. She will be moderating our back end. She's looking at the chat. She's answering any questions for you guys there. And also, although the first 45 minutes of this will be dedicated to our panelists, after that, we will open it up for questions, whether they are on Zoom, whether they are on Discord, or whether they happen to be in one of the computer labs. And Cassia and I can see everything that's happening. So Cassia is probably going to go around and just see if anyone has any questions. All right, I want to give a real brief introduction to this panel. And I want to first say that this is a series. We kicked this series off last semester with a kickoff event. You can find that on YouTube. I've been playing it a lot lately. This is New Technology Techniques. And also, very importantly, this was a collaboration, inspiration, encouragement from AIAS, Cassia, and the team that's working with that student organization. So it is very important to us to not only represent the profession, academia, but students as well. This is a student-forward conversation. We are interested in answering student questions about new technology techniques, and we are looking to take the amazing work that professionals, academics, people engaged in the AEC or just design community, bring that down, right? Which is actually why we are broadcasting from the 4th floor of the BAC and these computer labs. I would love to see people here, whether the Friday night works or not. We can evaluate that maybe after a year, but I would love to see people inspired by these conversations as they're working in our computer labs. We can also give one quick shout out to someone here who is Edwin Hernandez, who probably, there he is, right in Computer Lab 407. He is our manager of fabrication, and he is very intrigued and interested in this conversation. Now, with that said, I think I've appropriately used my intro 5 minutes. Each of our panelists are going to have about 5 minutes to talk, introduce themselves, and then after that, we'll get into a moderated conversation with me. And I am going to start with who kicked off a lot of our internal conversations, and that is Patrick. And Patrick and I recently did a similar thing to this, where we were broadcasting on Discord live from the laser cutter room while Patrick was working on a passion project. Patrick, welcome. Feel free to introduce yourself and take your 5 minutes.
There we go. Sorry about that. I was trying to mute myself. I'm Patrick Brady. I'm an architectural designer, and I've been practicing now for about 10 years with a small firm in Boston. As Peter mentioned, I've worked together with the BAC as well as Peter directly as part of the making and modeling class as part of an instructor. Also with Takbir, who's on this call as well. One thing that I'm really passionate about in terms of fabrication is understanding the control and protocols to how a project becomes realized. Where I sit often on the architectural end as a designer, it's often disconnected from fabrication or the direct production of a built work. While we do oversee the construction process and we do review that work, it's really important and crucial for us to find ways that we can improve the communication. I find that oftentimes the biggest mistakes are the result of miscommunication between the designer and a fabricator potentially. And oftentimes it takes showing up to the shop, reviewing details with the fabricator, reviewing mock-ups, and reviewing a series of details. As Peter mentioned, I had recently stepped into the BAC for a passion project. And while I'm very passionate about design and architecture, I'm also really passionate about music. There's something about the proportions, scales, and theory behind music that also carries well over to the design medium. And there's a couple projects I can share, Peter, if you think that's relevant for today in terms of that conversation. So one thing in terms of my practice that we work directly with the public sector. So a lot of clients include the Massachusetts Transportation Authority, the MBTA, as well as agencies like the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And one of the difficulties with our workflow, I guess, here is we're limited by cost extremely. So finding ways that we can develop and invoke design strategies and various complexities by involving ourselves with the fabrication process is often a challenge. So one of the projects that we've recently completed in the last year, I'm not sure if sharing is possible, Peter, but I don't know if you want sharing.
You gave me enough time to interrupt, and I am eating into your 5 minutes, but it's okay. We will not actually be doing any visuals for this entire
I wasn't sure
event.
if you wanted to.
You are welcome to talk about things, and this is also because we are interested in what people find interesting. And after this event, I am going to send around a petition to everyone who watches this for them to say, that sounded interesting. I want more of that. Patrick, sorry, go ahead.
No, sure. I just want to know what the expectation is. So along with that process for kind of public sector work, we really have to understand how we can kind of work through the economy and fiscal responsibility to find ways to translate that design. So one of my roles is involved in digital modeling and making sure that you can really convey the design as full-heartedly and invest a lot of time in rapid prototyping, utilizing different digital methods, whether it be laser cutting, 3D printing, whether it be simple as generating a series of renders or walkthrough videos to help advocate for the design as well. That's really my background and kind of my passion and kind of perspective here.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Now, Patrick and I were last in the laser cutter room, and I'm going to go to someone who has spent a lot of time in the room I'm in right now, but not physically, virtually. And Takbir has been teaching making and modeling at the BAC with me for, man, it's a long time. And more recently, we've actually had this classroom used in a hybrid format. Takbir is teaching completely hybrid. She has an on-site TA, Laura, who is helping out. And Takbir, how's it going?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm really enjoying teaching making and modeling. It started with completely online and then became hybrid. And I think this is something that the last few years have given us. It's kind of opportunity to be able to work from anywhere and work with people from all over the world, which has been a really great experience. Though making and modeling is a very hands-on kind of course, it's still possible for us to exchange knowledge online. And apart from being in the studio or in the classroom, I've also been able to look into the Fab Lab and see the work that's going on there, and also share some of the work that we do in our studio. So I am currently located in India. I'm an architect, and I've started a studio called Design Aware, which is located in India as well as in Dubai. And so I keep going back and forth between the two places, and I've dropped in at the BAC from both locations as well. And what's really great is that what we like to do at Design Aware, and when it comes to fabrication, there are two things that we're looking at. One is sort of really low tech traditional methods of fabrication, and also combining them with digital fabrication. So being in India, I think the last 10 years, when I first moved here after doing my master's from the AA, there was a lot of fabrication, digital fabrication, computational design, and all of these things that I had learned, and I wanted to bring them here. Then I sort of learned over a period of time that it was going to be very slower than I expected, because of lack of access to new techniques or new technologies or machines. Even though in India there's a lot of like a technological revolution going on, it's still not completely accessible, especially colleges of architecture and design are slow to adapt. So we started to study methods of fabrication that were traditional and more, dyeing crafts, which are using natural material. We started to make installations and do a series of workshops. So I created a workshop called the Fractals Workshop, in which it's more of a bottom-up sort of form-finding workshop, which is inspired a lot by Frey Otto and Bucky Fuller's work. And so we use our hands, and we use material to explore geometries in places where we don't have access to digital fabrication. So we're kind of combining these two things, and I think that also really fits into the agenda of making and modeling as well.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things we've worked on in making and modeling is this idea of one-to-one, right? Actually thinking about things one-to-one and not always thinking about things at scale. I'm going to bring in my great friend who dresses like me, Brad. So we're both wearing apparently the same shirt today. And also another thing, Brad and I were together at the Boston Society of Architects space for another really important conversation, right, Cassia? Yep. That was a part of AIAS. And Brad, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Peter and Cassia, for organizing today's event. Yeah, I was going to mention the last event that we were at a few weeks ago. And it's really important to have these forums because to echo some of Patrick's thoughts, communication is the key, both in terms of adoption and awareness of the ever-changing landscape that we find ourselves in as practitioners, as well as a key function of our job, which is to provide an interpretation of the client's wishes and translate them through a complex visual language that that others can be able to read and interpret and then execute. I mean, that's the conventional modality of practice. I think a lot of that's starting to change due to advancing technology. So if we look back just through the history of the profession, it's just like ink on mylar or linen or vellum or these sort of things, and then we're still we're still pushing geometry around on a computer screen, but very much in the same manual process of our predecessors. It's really just now that we're actually starting to delve into a completely binary method of communication and fabrication. And that's really transformative. And it's going to require a lot of shouting from the rafters from the choir, if you will, to make that message heard and understood by all the partners that we have in realizing the built environment. And we're still in a toddler stage. We're still bumping around and trying to figure out where we're going and what is this, put in our mouth, what does this taste like? Is that yucky? Is that, good for us? These sort of things. So it's an exciting time. If you were to ever to be like an emerging architect right now from the student perspective, this has got to be one of the most exciting times to be in college with your entire profession before you, because you have a wealth of a plethora of different paths that you can take, because one of the great things about the AEC industry is that it's wide and deep. And just because you start in one area of the profession doesn't mean that you have to be pigeonholed and spend your entire career there. Explore and ride this technology wave that is going to shape the profession and the world as we know it.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And Brad, you and I have talked a lot about this love of making, right? And detailing and just like really getting into how things come together, which continues to inspire me sometimes. I mean, I think in this age of the digital, which I love, it's amazing. Sometimes we fall away from just the making of things.
Yeah. Yeah. You can very easily lose yourself in a Rhino model for a few days. And it's an awesome place to be, and you can really just like tick 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 tick, get down into that level, which is a great way to explore. The converse of that is the more you define in the models, the less opportunity you allow for the trades to be able to bring their own means and methods, which is also creativity and problem solving, into the delivery process. So while it's great for the designer to be able to evaluate and iterate all these different permutations to test, to optimize, to explore, we can't lose sight of our trade partners who just have all this experience, hands-on knowledge that we'll just never have, right? There's just a divorce between what we're good at, what they're good at. But we need to incorporate that conversation into the feedback loop of design.
I agree. And I think this is a great segue to our next panelist, who has not only visited this room, 407, for some pretty amazing things, but also my apartment during COVID when we got to play with robots. So we're going to bring Ethan in. And I think this is actually very interesting, right? Brett's talking about trade. Ethan, I'm sure, has a bunch of things. And to my point of getting back to making things, like, how do robots feel about making things? Ethan, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ethan Kerber. I'm calling in from Midnight in Germany, where I'm here as a representative of robots in architecture research, and I'm certainly honored to be a part of this ongoing conversation. Me and Peter have collaborated on making workshops using remote access to robotics, which has been really exciting, something that was a necessity during the pandemic. I also am honored to work with Mahesh Das on a journal for construction robotics. And yeah, I would like to weave all these threads together kind of segue into my passions for digital fabrication. I think as Brad said, it's really one of the most exciting times to be a part of this industry. I think technology is ever increasingly accessible. I think there's a greater interest in getting back to connecting design to engineering to the fabrication and to bridging the gap between the digitalization that we find really prevalent on one side and so much of a manual rooting of building our construction structures on the other side. And I think there's this really growing field of robotics and digital manufacturing that's still at its infancy. As Brad said about putting things in his mouth, I always tell my students, don't lick the hot metal. If it's glowing, don't lick it. I really love working with robots. As part of Robots in Architecture research, we represent the commercial side of the Association for Robots in Architecture. We're really excited to actually have just announced the workshops for our next conference in Toronto. So if you're interested in digital fabrication, design, engineering optimization, or just having a good party with some interesting people, that'll be worth checking out. And I think it's a really interesting place to see students evolve into their careers in innovative ways in terms of finding not just interesting pathways into traditional practices, but also maybe building their own startups and realizing that through community resources, through teaching, through innovative practice, they can start small and still have big impacts. And so I really enjoy being part of the organization that transitions and helps people build skills to learn how to take things they might have learned in really innovative colleges like the Boston Architectural College and take that maybe into a garage or a fabrication facility or their own kind of growing factory. Part of what we've been looking at is making tools available to upskill students in robotics that go even beyond what's kind of the foundation of Grasshopper now that I think is taken for granted as being a kind of fundamental skill, and trying to make skills accessible for robotics that allow for Internet of Things connectivity, deeper access into the API of kinematic solvers like KUKA PRC, and how to connect remotely to robotics. So we're really excited to touch on all these topics of this conversation today.
Yeah, I agree. And I believe there are many people here who are interested in robotics. I know that our president of the BAC, Mahesh Das, is also interested in robotics and might join us for some questions later. Thanks, Ethan. And also, I want to again reiterate this idea of petitioning for things. Ian, you mentioned you're running workshops, right? We ran some workshops. I'm sure all of our panelists here would love to do some demonstrations or some workshops. And I really want to encourage our audience to petition for that and say, we would like to do that.
That'd be great.
Now, we're going to jump to someone who is actually, I've known the shortest out of everyone here. We met, I'm trying to remember how we met exactly. I think I put out a call for a teacher maybe, and you responded. And this is also the person I have spent the most time on video on Discord, who also recently invited me, I believe in person, but he might have just meant Discord, to SciArc, right, to check things out. So John, please introduce yourself. Welcome.
Yeah, most definitely. Whenever you're in LA, it doesn't even have to be SciArc. You're more than welcome to grab a drink, talk about our architectural woes. My name is John. I'm a researcher, designer, technologist, Egyptian American. I kind of am the odd one out here. Everyone here is very philanthropic with their time, and I feel like I'm not doing enough compared to the rest of you amazing people here on the panel. I think that my ideas on digital fabrication are ones that stem from academic care and the ability to translate knowledge strictly from an institution basis into a form of communication that can be absolved by a multitude of different people on and across multiple different medium. And I think that the use of digital fabrication is very relevant to equitable practices today, in that it becomes a means for giving everyone the opportunity to create. And whether that's architecture or just things, it really gives more power to people to just buy into the industry itself. I can keep going, but I think that'd be more for when we all can contribute.
Great. I really am glad you decided to join this panel, and I'm really glad we have such a diverse group here. I specifically did not allow us to get together as a group and talk beforehand. And I want this to be a discourse and to kind of challenge each other. I know for a fact John has said some things to me that challenge what other people have said here. I know that Brad has said some things that John has not heard, right? That also align with him, and John would maybe be happy to hear that, right? I know that Takbir has this like amazing idea of like how we go back to what nature is talking about, right? And Takbir, you say it much more eloquently than me. Now, with all of this here, I'm gonna jump to Patrick to kick us off, as Patrick supplied some of the first notes, meetings with me that then filtered into the description, whatever we want to call it, that was crafted for this event. And I'm going to read the first part of this. And Patrick, I want you to take it where you think it should go from there, because whether or not it was yours that you said, I actually don't know now, because I just kind of brought it all together and someone else helped me with it, whoever that was. In contemplating the therapeutic nature of recent thoughts, and from there, this idea of therapy, of making, right, of how it integrates into our practice or our lives. And why I go to Patrick first is because we did work on some passion projects you were working on, right? And that has been a big part of your life, right? I'm not sure it is a huge part of your current professional life, but how is something like this therapy, or how does it integrate?
Well, sometimes you get bored, you know. I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. Sometimes I think it's good to keep things fresh. To riff off of some of the things that Brad was talking about in the profession and kind of the current state of today, you know, I think the access to digital fabrication has greatly improved, and finding different ways that we can use it across different media, different, you know, practices, whether that be making an instrument or designing, you know, works for architecture. You know, those are very different things, or even something like a chair or a piece of furniture. You know, I think a passion project is often something that you task yourself. For me, it's always when I'm overwhelmed with a lot of other work. I need a distraction to kind of recenter myself and explore, you know, something different. And sometimes that can be a creative release that allows me to work through other complex problems that I've been struggling with for maybe a couple of weeks or even a month or something in that regard. So that's how I approach the passion projects. And I think it's also a good opportunity to engage with other disciplines, especially across the board, where, you know, often I might interact with a bunch of engineers and architects throughout the day, but I don't necessarily engage with artists or, you know, poets, even, you know, things of that nature. So I really enjoy the change up, you know, in a daily life.
I think it's fundamentally important overall, but I know that it's fundamentally important to design education, spatial design education, architecture, landscape, interior design studies. And sometimes, actually more recently, and potentially with the introduction of the digital, it's been harder to encourage people to make things or to fabricate things. And let's go to Takbir first, and then I want Brad to also weigh in on this. Takbir, can you talk about this? Like, how do you encourage people to make things? And you're in this really unique situation. I know you not only teach at the BAC, but also elsewhere. And you teach here in a class that's meant to make, and you're remote. Like, how are we encouraging people to make things when we're always mitigated by this kind of interface? And then Brad, when jump in whenever you want on this, you know, what do you see as the implications for not teaching making in school, right, as you move forward? Takbir, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really important to work with your hands. Like I think Brad said, you know, you sort of can get lost in Rhino for a very long time, and you can get lost with you know, modeling, and that's something. And it's not the real world really. It's something that it has real world implications, but it's not really tangible. So we're always trying to have this conversation between the tangible and the intangible. So I think it's really important right at the beginning of any design process to start with making with your hands. And I think that's what I really like to encourage, not just in making and modeling, but also in the fractals workshop and also in our practice. So the way we start any project is you know, very, very similar to the way we did it in design studio in college, and where we start with making with our hands and then go back and forth between the computer and the, you know, so it's like different interfaces. The computer is one interface, and then your hands and your desk and your materials, that's another interface. So I think it's really important. And the way we like to encourage that is, the back and forth. So you're not really disconnected from doing something crazy on the computer, doing some sort of modeling, which you can't do really quick with your hands. And some things you can do really quick with paper, let's say, which you can't do on the computer. So making the most or taking what is easiest in each medium.
Yeah. We all learn by doing, and we are stewards of the built environment. So with that pretext, as stewards of the built environment, we need to know what it's like to build the built environment. And you've got to understand the tactile relationship that the users of the built environment are going to experience with all the senses. You're responsible for that experience that you're creating that's going to resonate and leave memories with all the people that are using the spaces that you create. And you can't do that without picking up a piece of metal or a piece of masonry. You get the smell, you get the feel. How does it, when you are sitting next to a wall that's been warmed by the sun and it starts to radiate against you on your back, like how does that comfort, right, that comes from the spaces that you're creating, you only can appreciate that through the tactile, through the tactile physical realm. So any school that's not doing this with their students is harming future generations of designers in, pun intended, a material way, because of the lack of that tactile experience. In terms of like where we should be exploring and like how to engage this in class. So I'm fortunate enough to be an instructor for a couple of semesters here at the BAC for a Comp 4 studio, and want to give a couple shout outs to some students from last semester who are joining. So bonus points for being here, guys. I appreciate it. But the learn by doing, right? There's only, if I'm talking about like a curtain wall mullion or some complex like transition of an exterior assembly, there's only so much I can talk about this thingy connecting to the other thingy, and this, it's got to be able to move water this way, and it doesn't allow heat this way, and like there's only so much I can move my hands, I can draw patterns, this represents insulation. But it's like I feel so handicapped, right, in those conversations. To be able to integrate fabrication into that, the next step is to say, okay, we're talking about this kind of fenestration system, right? Student A, print this portion. Student B, rip this portion off of the table saw. Person C, mill this on the CNC. Then we all come together and we can assemble those pieces and parts so that we know deep in here, not just here, of what all these things and how they work and then how they function. Because only with that knowledge then that you can start to really to apply it to projects. In conventional practice, there is a step change between those who practice paper architecture, meaning those who haven't been out on a job site, versus those that have real CA experience, that have fought the fight, that have been there, seen their work get either put together or butchered, right? And trying to create that vision. The difference is so profound, right, in practice. To be able to start to bring that back into the education of the architect, we'll be creating some real like assassins out there in the design process.
I agree. And the word I typically use in relationship to this, and we've been talking about making fabrication, right? I think these are different things and imply different things, but I use empathy, a developed empathy for those who are going to make things or fabricate the things or build the things. Now, with that said, we're going to move to John and Ethan, and I'm going to let them battle for who gets the mic first. But how do, right, robots, of course, Ethan, you're just, we don't know if you're a robot or not. I think you are human. But Ethan, how does that play into it, right? We've had all these conversations, but like, do robots feel and have emotions? And the other reason I want to bring John into this and have you guys kind of fight on this a little bit is, John, you've talked very passionately about, right, the ethics, the human, the morality, right, even to the point of the philosophy behind here. And I'm going to make another connection, which is that I am very interested that SciArc hired Graham Harmon as a professor of architecture who is a philosopher and who talks about object-oriented ontology, which is a shift, a huge shift away. And whether or not you agree with object-oriented ontology, it can be kind of, I don't know what the word is. I'm actually not going to put a word to what it might or might not be. With all that said, John, Ethan, go for it.
John, have at it.
I mean, there's some serious allegations of calling you a robot. You should probably tackle that first.
I don't know if I'd know. That's the problem. I think that just like communicating between designers and contractors, just like communicating between IKEA and me assembling furniture, there's a real art to encoding information for assembly and passing that on to somebody that you can't hold the hand of and get them to assemble it as per your intent. And I think whether that's a craftsman or an expert in the field with years of experience or robot, there's a real challenge to communication in our industry. It's such a and it's something that does lack empathy. It's something that does make you want to go to therapy. It's something that does make you want to really study not just what we're building, but how we're communicating what we're building, whether it's between a robot or between architect and engineer. And I see that more and more there's a need for methods of explicit communication of assembly information, of how materials should how you should be true to material, like you're saying, Brad, and what the impact of our design environments are, and whether they're positive or antisocial. I was just watching videos about like antisocial architecture in New York and things about, you know, keeping homeless people from sleeping any place versus memorials, which try to bring people together to for therapeutic purposes. So I'm really interested in the social creation of space. That's kind of what brought me to the AAC industry and how we come together to build, you know, community environments. And I think that how digital fabrication plays a role in that is really interesting, because we do think, I still see that it's a chisel. I mean, and when I teach people to work with robots, it's very much in the hopes that they will learn to use it as a handcrafted tool that maybe has more axes, sure, but especially in hopes that they will learn to build proof of concepts that they can go to their contractors counterparts and say, look, I built this in a fab lab. Certainly we can implement it on your $1 million assembly line. And I think we see ideas that come out of building models that assemble modularly coming out in real architecture that's innovative. I saw Assembly OSM just recently put up in a day a building in New York with modular construction. And I mean, I could see that I could imagine that person as a kid playing with Legos thinking, oh, why aren't these, you know, apartments that I could stack? Yeah, it's I could say definitely I teach a lot at the Arvitat Aachen under Professor Belchuchin. I'm really honored to work with her. And I've definitely had that experience where architects come to me and they've never built anything. And that's really, you see the challenge of materiality and how much, how important it is to get your hands dirty and how therapeutic it is and how powerful, empowering it could be to learn about materiality. But I'm just a robot. What do I know? John?
So I think I agree with everyone here in terms of like what fabrication and digital fabrication brings to the table in terms of pedagogy. I think Takbir put it best when she said that these are just different interfaces. in that like you can break down the world knowledge of the limitations of materiality as part of one of the interfaces. I think I don't want to get into triple O. That's just like a bag of questions personally. But I think that yeah, embracing it all, and understanding that at some point, building is kind of a privilege, and that the ability to gain that knowledge is also a privilege. And whether that's an institutional given privilege, or if that's an office that gives you that privilege, to make things and learn in that way, it should be taken as one of these interfaces to then design with. And that the interfaces really make you a well-rounded architect in how well you can execute the language between them.
I think it is also an interesting conversation about whether digitalization of fabrication or digitalization of design and engineering is increasing the accessibility to this privilege, or limiting it. And so during the pandemic, we built this cloud remote control system, and we wanted to increase accessibility of robots. And oftentimes I talk to people and I wanted to teach courses, and they're like, well, we don't have laptops to do that with. And so I realized that there's a huge amount of privilege that comes with the ability to build things and to explore ideas in physical form, and to especially see them realized on some of the largest scale. And also there's a real honor to the vernacular architecture of making things on smaller scales with your hands and with digital and building. Like I can say, here in Germany, there are not a lot of skyscrapers being built. It's mostly single story homes and architecture on a smaller scale. And I've grown to really appreciate the history of it and the materiality of it. And I think these are all really interesting questions as to, I mean, certainly when it comes to robotics, also there's a lot of ethics of, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Will this make jobs, take jobs? Things like this get controversial. I get a lot of pushback at Thanksgiving to come, I'm sure, on this issue.
Great, we're doing great on time. We're about at the halfway point. And speaking of democratization, or just kind of allowing things to be more accessible, we are going to enter into a portion where we allow our audience to ask questions. We'll see how many questions we get. I have plenty of questions to help us go with this. So again, if you are interested in asking a question, whether it is in the chat, whether you would like to turn your voice on or turn your video on, please indicate that in the chat at this time. We'll give it a little bit of time to figure that out. I'm going to talk for a little bit. Well, Cassia sees if anyone on the fourth floor would like to ask a question from the rooms. If she doesn't find anyone, that's okay as well, because of course we have plenty to talk about. I do want to, so yeah, feel free to walk through the rooms and interrupt me if you find anyone that has something they'd like to say.
Love that.
Because Peter should just be interrupted all the time. So most of the time I'm just talking to fill the silence of my classrooms. No, to this idea of democratization, right? I really do believe that the digital in many ways has democratized a lot of this stuff, has taken it out of the hands of the master builder, right? And that is so interesting as we talk and contextualize making fabrication throughout history, right? And all of us, I think, whether it was at my kind of bringing it to the conversation or one of you bringing something similar to the conversation, has looked at this shift. You might call it post-digital, right? Which I think primarily comes with a lot of like visuals, how we're representing things, actually a push away from hyper-realism that we saw was kind of destroying, I think, our sense of wonder within architecture, landscape, interior design studies. But how does something like moving from, let's say, the Baroque period into the modernist period, right? The Bauhaus had a huge effect on many of these things. And then we saw modernism turn into postmodernism. And speaking of chaos, right, which was in our description, I mean, that was a very chaotic time. And at that time, the Bauhaus gave us a lot, and we go from there. But I'm actually starting to question some of the dogmatic ways that they talked about making, that they talked about access. And to make a real quick kind of point, and to talk about OOO, object-oriented ontology, which I'm not going to talk about for a long period of time, but right, Graham Harman, in my interpretation, is talking about how everything kind of relates to each other, whether it's a robot or a plant or a person, that we can learn from these different things and actually see that there is an empathy in that. And we're getting away from this anthropocentric view of the world to suggest that humans are the masterminds of everything, which actually, that's simply just a frame that we view things in. I also will lead to one thing here, and after this, it looks like Cassie, I'm sure, can confirm that our people here are focused on their work they're doing, or
Yeah, very invested.
very invested. And we also, at this point, encourage people online to chat with us and say, I would like to ask a question. But I'll leave this group to continue this conversation, which is, right, what has happened with the democratization? And are we doing something like ornamentation, which is a word we've talked about? Is fabrication in the way, digital fabrication, our access? Is it ornaments that we add to things? Is it actually the buildings that we're creating? And how does that contextually relate to the place we find ourselves in? I am actually thoughtful of something that Patrick Schumacher, who I actually disagree with in many ways, said about parametricism, his coined term, capital P, coined term for architecture, that it was a hegemony, his words. And that is a ruling force by power. And you can actually look and see that Graham Harman and Patrick Schumacher have kind of very different views. So we'll stay away from that side of the philosophical conversation. John, you said it very well. But what do you guys think? What is this idea of ornamentation? Is digital fabrication a hegemony, a ruling force by power? Go at it.
So sorry, I just want to interject real quick. I think my qualms with talking about OOO is that there's been quite a few conversations with Graham where he doesn't know how to resolve it's the product OOO can make as an architecture, and nailing it down to like one solution or a type of architecture that embodies the OOO ideology. But I do think that you've made some very interesting points here where you're talking about like through the ages and the acquisition of new technologies into architecture, how it provides these different types of movements like the Bauhaus and Pomo, and like the post-digitalization of architecture or design. And I think that the big thing that's been constant between all of these lineages is material. Like, and I think that also harkens back to the OOO aesthetic of like encompassing all things at the same scale. So I think that like material within the computer, your labor as a material, and then a building practice as another material, all kind of weigh integral parts into the digital fabrication of what architecture can be.
Very much encourage our panelists to talk and ask questions of each other and respond to each other.
Well, I think some of the, just to keep riffing off this OOO conversation here, because I think it's so fascinating, but some of his earlier work, was grounded with Heidegger and talking about tools and kind of instrumentation. And, there was, I think, 3 principles, and one of them was focused around how technology is not an instrument. It's actually like a way of understanding information or a certain method or workflow, which I very much personally disagree with, that kind of philosophy. But, when we bring up things like going from the Bauhaus movement or the idea about architecture could be universally placed anywhere. It was very much not driven by sight. And then to see that evolve into ideas about complexity and contradiction with people like Robert Vincere and also Denise Scott Brown, who should be credited on that publication as well. But also talking about, how does that translate to this digital era where we are today? And I think a lot of that has stemmed from accessibility and privilege to accessing those tools. Something as simple as picking up a pencil can often cultivate any design in any numerous ways to the same capacity that any formal form of technology or computer could do. And I think we are still very early on in that process of accepting computers and computational design processes into our workflow, because it's only been around for 3 decades, really in our A&E industry. It took a very long time for those computational softwares to catch up visually to work in a capacity that designers could interact with and engage with. Thinking about things like AutoCAD early on and even early versions of Rhino. But then, thinking about what the future might hold potentially, where previously we used to create drawings to inform a fabricated process or a set of instructions to assemble something. At some point, does that digital model inform the fabrication directly, and the role of the drawing is something different? I think oftentimes, it's choosing the right tool for the right job at the right time. What is appropriate? Contextualizing all of that and designing vernacularly is very important, being site-driven, but also understanding the stakeholders to what you're creating and those influences. So, while I think some of the ideas about OOO are kind of interesting as segues, it really challenges, the access technology and who gets access to that technology, I guess.
I think we see a growing increase in access to tech, or interest in access to technology from people on the construction side of the industry, and that this is something that I think has been watched across the aisle from the architecture and engineering side, as the power of digitalization has been easier to implement when it's all in ones and zeros and in planning and on a computer screen and put out on paper. But when you have to put brick on top of brick, that's a hard thing to bring a computer to the construction site with. But I think now we see this groundswell where the benefits of this accessibility to efficiency and innovation are kind of spilling over, and we see a huge interest in let's say the mature application of digitalization, not for complex geometry or even high performance structures, but just to automate simple tasks to increase efficiency. And I think that's really an exciting place where I think that these 3 hubs or spokes of the wheel will come together to increase the pace of innovation. I also definitely see that one of the hurdles to accessibility of computational design has been the challenge of really learning to code. And I think we're at like a really pivotal point where we can, break past visual programming. And learning to program in C# or Python or Java has never been easier with like large learning models than ever before. I've never walked around the lab so much and seen people like coding in collaboration with ChatGPT than ever before. And it's been really, in a short amount of time, taken our students' work to like another level of proficiency. And so I do think it's interesting to think about agency and this movement, and how people movements kind of evolve in sync, and it's hard to separate the individual from the overall movement. And I think that it's definitely entering a new phase now that's really exciting, where accessibility and things, the aesthetics will certainly evolve from it, and I think we'll be into a much more code-based architecture, something designed from large learning models that become buildings, which is an interesting shift also, and well, for better or worse, who knows.
I agree, Ethan, and I want to talk more about this aspect of coding as well as an importance there. But a question for you and a question for Mahesh, who's going to join us as we talk here. Ethan, what's the difference between a robot and a machine? And welcome, Mahesh.
It's a great question. I have a very advanced garbage bin in my home, and when you wave your hand, it opens, and we call it our robot. And yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I look at Dusty Robotics, and which grew out of the Roomba, and I think, oh, where's the line? Maybe I defer to Mahesh.
Well, thank you, Peter, and good to see you all, friends. Ethan, good to see you. It's probably pretty late there.
It's pretty late, yes.
Thank you for staying up for us.
My
And
pleasure.
yeah, Brad, John, Patrick, and Takbir, good to see all of you together. And yeah, I've been listening in, so it's been wonderful discussion. I think we'll transcribe this and get something published. But it's been wonderful. Great discussion. So, Peter, you asked the question about what is a robot, and I think that's a good question we pose in our new book that has just come out, which we launched last month at Boston Book Festival, and now widely available. Nobot, Nobot, and actually I can put it in the chat here. So we are excited. It's being well received. Daniel Lipskin has asked a copy, and we sent it to him, and is reading it, and we'll know what. So there have been good response from wide-ranging people in general public, not just design professionals. So in that book, we talk about really what does it mean to be a robot? What is a robot? And I think you talk about object-oriented kind of approaches, ontological approaches and all that, but we approach it from phenomenology. We say that when you think about it, it's been made in the image of being human, and or image of being a living being. And in that sense, it's not a very easy answer, not an instrumentalist or shall we say, deterministic answer of it is just a thing, it is an instrument, it is a tool. It's none of those. It is made in our image. And so there is something to be said about it has a status among living beings. That is one. The second thing is you just talked about AI and its impact. It's the first time in human history that we have intelligence, human level intelligence available on a tap. You just turn the tap and intelligence flows out. That's never happened before in human history. And the significance of that is AI provides intelligence that is disembodied. There is no body to this unless you put it in a robot or you put it in a body of some kind. That, well, of course, you see the Boston Dynamics dog with ChatGPT married to it, and that's when you begin to get spooked. Say, wow, that is spooky. But it is not as spooky when it is in your laptop and on your phone and large language models accessible to you with intelligence. But it is as significant that intelligence of this level is available now. So, by the way, here is a book that just came out. And so the book is really a graphic novel. We took fiction as a format to address that question. What is a robot? What is human? What is God? And then we kind of have fun with it. So it's really a fun book, but also a very serious book that challenges our notions of what is a robot, what is human. We think robots are the other. We think we can control them. We can control the intelligence. But once intelligence is there, the whole notion of intelligence is it is intelligent. So right now we think we can control it until we cannot. And once you embody it in robots, then they have a status that is legal as well as phenomenologically, it is a status of a quasi-living being. And in jurisprudence circles, that's being talked about quite a bit, about what is the status of simply a robot, not even AI-powered robot, but any robot, even a dumbest possible robot would have some status, such as a thermostat. A traditional thermostat is also considered a robot by purists. in robotic circles, including the trash can that Ethan has talked about. So that's the kind of a picture we paint in that. And it is going to transform, I think, what we do in the profession. Of course, it is going to transform the world of human beings and living beings, but for sure, it is going to transform us. And I think, as Brad was talking about, it's the most exciting time to be in, definitely in our field, but any field, to be addressing these questions, because this is one of the most transformative times. It is like discovery of fire, and it's now intelligence. So exciting things in the offing, no doubt about it. I will do one more thing.
Mhm.
Oh, go ahead, Ethan, go ahead.
No, I think as architects and engineers and designers, we're also futurists, especially in this digital realm. And I think that we're at the beginning of a huge transformation. We've been talking a lot about material and then fabrication and then kind of robotics and intelligence. And I think that I like to look at the shifts of architecture in material. I mean, we went from stone, we went to steel to glass. I think the future is like getting into carbon fiber, and I could see a point where, well, material becomes even more imbued with robotic intelligence in a real, I mean, in maybe 100 years. I don't know how far down the road, but I think it's really interesting to think of, like you say, a building that we live in as a robot. Normally, I think of as a robot as something I control and something that's rather large, but still not something that I live inside of. Whereas, well, you really can think of, from the thermostat to the amazing amount of intelligence we have in our homes as robots with Google Nest and with all the IoT automation in our homes. And it's really amazing to think of what will come. Actually, your mention of the graphic novel brought me back to one of my favorite graphic novels, Ronin by Frank Miller, where material becomes like alive and the cities become made out of this organic biotechnology material. And well, I could see like some day in the future where we're growing houses, where we're living inside really something that's hard to distinguish between an animate and an inanimate and an intelligent object. And it's well, it really brings a lot of interesting issues when you think about, I'm a roboticist, what that'll mean in the future if you're a chemist or a not a mechanical person, but more of an artificial kind of biologist, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely, Ethan. I think one of the stories in the book is there are 4 stories. One of the stories is a house robot which raises a kid till the kid becomes a teenager, and then the relationship changes. And so we explore the complexity of that relationship. And in another chapter, Architecture Without Architects, we square front and center address the notion that it actually starts with a theme that at some point in the future, human architects are banned from practicing architecture because AI becomes so good and safe and reliable and all of that, but humans are banned. So there is a last remaining human architect in hiding somewhere in Bogota, Colombia. And so the protagonist goes in search of this last remaining human architect, which is a premise for, it sets it up for what is the complexity of being human and being potentially an architect at a time when it is banned. And so those are the kinds of themes which actually might become real. And, it's already becoming real in, shall we say, a transportation where, there's a lot of automation on the flight deck, and a pilot is not supposed to be touching too many things. So the joke goes that in the future, the flight deck will have a human and a pilot. And the job of the dog is to make sure the human doesn't touch anything. And the job of the human is to feed the dog. So that it might not be a joke anymore as we go into the future. I would say it may sound far-fetched, but I think our fundamental notions of who we are as humans and who those are as robots and what it is as intelligence, all of those are going to be problematized in very real, simple, fundamentally human ways. So look forward to it. And it's good that we are all at the table, so we can actually shape the discourse, understand it, and foresee things, and be able to transform it in a bit more controlled way. So as I said, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So we don't want to be on the menu, certainly. We want to
And
be
yet,
at
I guess my question would be to us as educators, how, I mean, with the still, how this is changing, how we teach the generation that's kind of coming up about architects. I mean, we still want, you can't be so futuristic that you can't get employment at a firm, and yet we want to be futuristic to the point where we're creating the people that will revolutionize the industry and think, you know, that don't understand that something's impossible, and so they make change that we might have never have considered. It's a really tough push and pull, I think, between architecture education and architectural practice.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something else.
No, I ramble. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So I'm just going to say that we chose dystopian genre because the value of dystopian fiction is they portray futures that we can avoid. So we scare ourselves and then we try to avoid it. And that's the why we painted that picture in a dystopian way. I think in a real way here in Boston, to many of your points, all of you have made points about how it's not like one big grand narrative of robotics and intelligence transforming everything, but rather it is in little ways. I think, Ethan, you said that. In little ways, little things begin to change, and before you realize, the paradigm has been shifted. So in Boston, there are at least 3 or 4 dozen startups who are in the construction robotics space that are trying these various things. And we are actually speaking with the venture fund who is very closely associated with us to explore the potential of something new that we will do. Hopefully, we'll be able to announce it at some point in the next few months. But it just goes to show there is a hotspot here, then there are hotspots in Europe and that support startup activity. And there's a lot of work going on because there you just do it and not wait for a whole lot of theory to be framed around it, but you just try it and see what happens. And that is what they're doing. And it is quite powerful and real and transformational.
We have just about under 30 minutes, maybe closer to 20 minutes left in the portion of this that is more dialogue based. And Ethan, I'm going to have you explain something real quick, but I also want to jump to Takbir and to talk about how things are going in your neck of the woods, your part of the world, right? And also react to what Ethan explains here and how that might change how you work with students, how you work with professionals, things like that. So Ethan, can you explain what a digital twin is and like how this is useful? Why I'm interested, and I want to actually say this in recognition that we do want to partition for demonstrations or workshops based on some of this stuff. I would love, and I see a lot of wonder in students when they visualize the fabrication. Mm-hmm. And that's using something like a CAM-based software, computer-aided manufacturing, and actually seeing what it looks like to fabricate. Now, that's a long way to digital twin, and it's a very robust infrastructure you have. And then again, remember, Takbir, I'd like you to respond to what Ethan says and how that might integrate to what you're doing in India.
Yeah. How we use digital twins in our cloud remote control software is to we've built this distributed communication infrastructure for controlling robots that people from around the world could send code to the robots, and the robots could send states back to distributed machines and revisualize the actual action that's being taken. I think in architecture, we have this huge push and pull between the digital ideal and the physical reality. One thing that I think that's interesting about digital twins, especially when we think about innovation, is that we want to push the limits of what there are specifications that permit us to do in reality. So one of my I'm studying wire arc additive manufacturing. And of course, one of the most famous examples of that is the MX3D bridge, which they just pulled down from canal in Amsterdam. And this was so kind of, they didn't pull it down because of any failure, but because it was just end of its demonstration. But it was so beyond the scope of specifications that they had to embed sensors in it to understand the live performance of it, the live loads, the stresses, how many people were on it. And I think this digital twinning of production processes is interesting for people to monitor what's going on in a production cycle, but also the digital twinning of material in post-occupancy is really important to see, is this lead building performing to the benefit of the sustainable goals, things like this. And I think whether it's advanced things like carbon fiber or 3D printed steel or more vernacular materials like rammed earth, I think a lot of these things push the limits of our what the codes would allow a contractor to build. I know the 3D printing concrete industry is going through this now as they try to really commercialize this technology. So it's very interesting, digital twins, and not something easy to accomplish. Takbir?
I think I had a really great time in Ethan's workshop last time, where we were able to see in real time how the robot is, we're controlling the robot sitting miles away. Also, like you said, trying to be able to visualize what the action is of the robot or how it's building things before it actually does. And I think that's really relevant when we talk about accessibility, and we talk about how to be economical. So you can visualize the entire process and probably identify certain bugs or issues in the process before it actually happens. And we've been doing that also with virtual reality models of buildings, right? So we're able to visualize the space or visualize the process before it actually takes place, and that is much more. It's a more lighter way of going through the process. Sometimes, of course, you have to build to be able to see the mistakes, but it's really great if you're able to sort of preemptively identify what the issues are going to be before you spend money and material and manpower on a certain process. And I think also for accessibility, I think there's a lot of digital or let's say machinic inaccessibility here where I am, and I'm in two different places which are very, very different from one another, because in Dubai it's all very high tech, and they're trying to get in robots even for the littlest, tiniest things that you want to make, and there's 3D printing things which are very obvious also. So there's like this dichotomy. So in India, what I've noticed is what's really interesting to me now is augmented reality, and using the resources and the materials and whatever you have on hand to be able to build something. So you don't have a robot. I wish we did, but we don't have an access to a robot as easily. And also when you're doing something which is let's say at a higher level, so if we're building something on a higher floor, then it would be very difficult to get a robot in that small space and push it up there. But with augmented reality tools and the manpower that we have in India, we have a huge population, we have a lot of manpower. So everybody has a smartphone in their hands, and they're able to really easily read 3D models, be it physical or digital. And that's something that we found surprising initially, but all of the workers on site, they really caught up with kind of understanding 3D models and 3D visualization or projection. So they were actually able to, we built a wall that was using hologram. So the workers themselves were able to read and understand the program, which is just an app on your phone, and sort of just build it up. So I think it is definitely, there are many ways that technology is making things more accessible and decentralized as well. So and also when it comes to ornament, because as Peter was talking about ornament earlier, is there, a lack of ornament now, or is there going to be a new language? I think that reminds me of these squinch arches in these old tombs that we have here in Hyderabad, where the squinch arches at the corners, they have these carvings and these ornaments. And they have carvings not because, just on a whim or because of decorative purposes, but because they wanted to hide the shape of the squinch arch. And they wanted to, sort of give it a kind of form on its own, and that became an ornament. So I think it's kind of a bottom-up process sometimes. When we look at ornamentation, we think it's top-down and we think it's sort of decorative, but it could be the other way around if you go deeper into it. And I really enjoyed learning about that bottom-up process of how the ornament came about.
This idea of ornamentation is super interesting to me in the way it's shifted. And although I think there's a lot more to talk here, and I would love to do a demonstration or even a workshop on some of this stuff, I want to go back to this idea. I'm going to not pick on Patrick necessarily, but use Patrick as an example, right? And I think there's a lot of relationship to how fabrication, digital fabrication, and these new processes are affecting the cost, the capitalism, or the actual way in which we do the work. And Patrick, I want you to kind of imagine that you are working in a firm as an architectural intern. You have access to limited amount of fabrication, and you're being asked to do this right in the shop there. We're seeing this as a developing trend, right? Access to these things. And now you find yourself as an architectural intern. Patrick is many things, very important. He's a teacher, professional, all these things. So we're not assuming that Patrick is these things, but imagine that you were asked to fabricate things, right? And that is actually not communicated to the overall scope of the project, right? We're actually just like hiding that. There's a very common trend in this field. And actually, I think Brad also, I'm going to invite you to this conversation after Patrick, has a lot of thoughts on the cost of these things, what you show, what you don't show. So Patrick, how would you feel if you essentially were just doing a bunch of labor?
It's an interesting question. I think one of the things, you mentioned that many things. I think as designers, we are many things. We are generalists. And we're generalists in a time when other industries are specializing. If you look at the medical industry, to specialize in a certain sector means that you might be able to cure cancer and certain things that have been challenging and plaguing humanity for centuries. When we think about designing and this approach to being a generalist and taking on something like labor of making and fabricating things in an office, there's one thing to make a hand model, right? That often is labor intensive. Takbir was mentioning about the kind of cost drivers about material, but there's also time that we have to factor, right? So when we're making something by hand, it's our time that we're devoting to that work, and we tend to have a strong connection to that thing that we're making by hand. What digital fabrication offers, and I think some of the optimism that is seen from a designer perspective, is that it enhances your ability to fabricate and to maybe fabricate more efficiently, so that you're spending less time on one specific thing and able to cover multiple models. Now, in terms of somebody's role as an architectural intern in an office, I think it's up to that individual to determine if they enjoy that making and modeling side of things. I think for me personally, it's very important in any practice setting to make sure that you have kind of a full perspective of making and modeling, whether that be in the digital realm or in kind of a metaphysical setting, or if it's in the physical world, very tangibly, where you're making things with your hands and starting to account for things like glue tolerances and fit up issues that, gravity doesn't exist, for example, in programs like Revit, and yet we're designing these big skyscrapers in it. So how does that work? I think as computation can start to analytically review design and methods of fabrication, if we think about architectural detailing on envelopes, being able to thermally read and analyze your details and understand where's the thermal bridging happening and those issues, and then to fabricate a model and understand how does that physically look. How do I engage with that? How does that cornice appear from afar? Maybe you're studying certain perforations and you want to understand how big do I want those perforations to be? Rather than looking at them on a computer screen, why not fabricate them and live with them for a little bit? I think as designers, we often dream up these ideas, but we often don't live with those ideas. And I think as much as we can make things and interact with them, it can only benefit our process.
I think one thing that's really interesting about the cost of innovation is really who in the industry is responsible for that investment. Because I just recently was listening to a lecture by Roland Snooks, and he was like, well, this robotically fabricated thing is so affordable, I could make it for $3,000. And then in a under breath, he said, oh, plus the $100,000 worth of research that went into it, and there is this idea of who does the intern that stays up all night to kind of impress his boss carry that burden of architectural innovation, or is it the innovative architect firm who wants to really push from design to fabrication? Is it on the design build firm who gains the benefit of this efficiency, and who's investing in this research? Is it the system supplier? Is it the universities and the academics? It's a really there's not really, I think, a business model for where innovation kind of is funded in the AEC industry, and I think it's a challenge because the goal is efficiency and more high performance buildings and more capable fabrication, but it does take a lot of investment. It's not let's hope it's not all on the interns in the shops, but maybe sometimes. I think.
Yeah, no, Ethan, I think that's a good point. The venture fund I mentioned is there was a $100 million venture fund dedicated to construction technologies that has been exhausted, and there is now a $250 million venture fund being created for construction robotics and other technology space here. And so I think the innovation is going to come from startups much more aggressively and profusely.
Yeah.
So people will be then stakeholders in that.
Yeah. And I think that's a growing part of of what young generations want out of education in general is entrepreneurship kind of training, how to build a startup, even if they join a big firm. I think there's an approach where big firms are trying to build a Silicon Valley mentality inside their groups. Let's say one of my favorite firms is Torton Tomasetti, and they've done this really well, where they took a couple of grasshopper geeks and turned it into this incubator within their large organization. So it's very interesting. I quite like the startup world, and I think it's very cool to hear that Boston's certainly a center of that.
I agree. And I want to bring Brad into this as well. Brad, I'm going to read a comment we got on Discord, actually, Discord chat, which is, you don't have to respond to this, but it kind of brings us somewhere. How do you guys anticipate divisions in the construction industry changing as a result of the labor involved in digital twinning, or with any other recent developments?
So the labor involved in the production and creation of all these digital environments?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, they're all getting hired by construction companies, are all hiring architecture students. So at least that's what my friends on the construction side tell me. My daughter even has a really great friend at the University of UMass Amherst. I think she's the first person in their design school to have a dual degree in VDC and architecture. So it's a compelling shift. And the conventional architectural model, percent of construction, sort of fee-based, race to the bottom fee structure, is not designed to support innovation. It's very challenging. It's only a few firms actually are able to have the profit levels, which come at the expense of all the staff. I'll tell you because I've been there. To be able to create enough extra space in your day to be able to try and experiment and do some of these other things. So to Mahesh's point, I think it's going to come outside of the conventional architecture practice. It has to, because there's just not a lot of bandwidth with deadlines and, you know, utilization rates and all the things that you're being graded on as an employee at these places. It's very challenging. I think what we accomplished at my old shop, you know, is unique. It is unique in the region. There's only one other firm that has a comparable fabrication program in the city. A lot of folks are trying, but it is, you know, it's just really hard to do. So, you know, thinking about Patrick's point of being generalist, I mean, in a sense, you know, that's kind of the old modality of thought is master of all, you know, expert in none sort of type thing. I want to challenge that a little bit for the future, because the building industry is and continues to be getting much more complex in all the things that is expected out of a project. And it's becoming impossible for any single person to be able to synthesize that much data and requirements to deliver a project. So I think we're definitely in an area of specialization that's necessary. And so the architect is almost becoming the master coordinator. And that's the value add that they're able to provide in practice today.
It's a really important.
May I respond to that wonderful question?
Go ahead, Mahesh.
So I think there are two things that are important to be said about it. One is change will be guided by those with access to capital. You can look at various industries. You look at healthcare industry. Now, obviously, doctors are very well paid, definitely better paid than architects and others in the society. And yet, you look at who has a capital that now orchestrates healthcare industry, at least in the US, if not in other markets, it is the insurance companies. And they're not doctors necessarily, right? At least that's a business model where they have the capital and they begin to absorb, to actually, shall we say, absorb a lot of the sporadic, the other kinds of business models that have existed before, like independent practices. And in our space, suddenly construction companies have access to a lot of capital and wherewithal, no doubt about that. And there may be others coming from Silicon Valley, where there are these startups. And it just takes one startup to really go big, unicorn, and suddenly you have the wealth to be able to direct a number of research directions and innovations and startup activity to come. Another example is Google Earth. You know, I've been, you know, let's say in design computation space for now nearly 30 years. And there have been endless debates had in various conferences that talked about something like Google Earth. And I still remember that vividly. And suddenly Google Earth comes and everything has been blasted open. Again, that is capital-driven innovation coming from a startup called Google at the time. And Google Earth is now so commonplace, you know, so there is a model around it. So I would say follow the money and follow the capital, where it is going and where it is held, then you begin to see who is at the table. And so architects and designers of various kinds will play a role, will continue to play a role. The only question is, are we going to be vetted as a profession and as professionals to the model of a small business firm and or a moderate sized business firm? Even if you take 200, 300 people firm, which is called large firm, it is still very tiny compared to anything else. So there is a lot of boutique work that is done in these spaces, but large-scale transformations would be coming from elsewhere. And these would be absorbed likely into whatever that shape it takes, that organizational structure in the larger society. Could be construction companies, it could be venture funds, it could be some other Silicon Valley-based organizations with access to capital and wherewithal.
And we're starting to wrap up the formal portion of this panel discussion. I'm going to go to John here to have the last word, and then we'll just kind of like, I'll give my last spiel, and then for the end of the time, we'll let the conversation go where it is. People can drop off, that kind of thing. But John, say what you will, but I was looking at my notes from our conversations, and I have this thing written that says, calling anything fabricated is a misrepresentation. And I'm not exactly sure why I wrote that down. We could talk to it together, but respond to that and what you've been hearing. What do you think, John?
So I'm trying to think of the headspace for context when I said that. But I think it had sprung from when we were talking about like the replicability of architectural items, everyday items, due to digital fabrication being more accessible to everybody. And I think it also stems from a space where I don't think that, yes, there are original ideas, but for the most part, they're spins of older ideas. So saying that something is original is kind of a farce in a lot of different ways. Can you repeat what I said? Sorry.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we're clear about this. This is me taking notes furiously as I listen to you talk. And as I recall, I think the conversation was actually similar to something that happened recently where I had made something through AI and someone had said, thank you, AI, right? And you and I were talking about what is the role of the human in this and who is the author and the owner. And I think what you were suggesting is that, like we mentioned before, there's a difference between like, I've made this, I've fabricated this, and that people are starting to just bulk everything into one term. Oh, that's fabricated, right? Oh, that was digitally created. And I think you were taking offense, and I'm putting that word, you can correct me if I'm wrong, to not actually going back to the author, right? The person that is actually doing the work, which is also very interesting because I remember these old videos of when Sketchpad was news broadcasters were saying, here's Sketchpad, right? Invented at MIT, first CAD. I guess people could debate me on that, but the news anchor that was doing the interview said, don't worry, world, there's a human behind this, right? And I'll let you go for it.
So I don't think I would. Yeah, the human element to design is very important, but I think that this fear of the capabilities of AI within design or just in general, the only fear that I've ever expressed with that is like this idea of the black box. That's just like this accumulation of knowledge that we don't know where it's coming from or what are its directives. But I think that in terms of like ownership for things that are fabricated, it's a big issue to say that this has no author behind it, especially when saying that it's also assisted, designed through any type of like machine learned collaborative. And I think my idea of that is actually pivoting towards like a nonchalance of the idea of just like, I think everybody understands that even though there's an idea of like prefabrication in some sorts through AI or making things easier through technology, I don't think that takes away the merit of the labor of producing something. And that's always going to have a lot of merit. And I think that's ultimately what we all kind of strive for, is merit. Sorry, my mind is just like really focusing on the previous conversation with Mahesh and Brad. And I've dedicated some time to like researching like what would be the best, and this is more of a question for them. I'm sorry if like this is gonna overtake the time, but like as an industry of architects, do you think that we as being as general as an architect with like a degree in architecture is not specific enough for the industry? We all strive for like these like specialized career salaries, but also like these specializations within big firms, institutions, even as like a specific type of architect. Do you think that like as a pedagogical director that it's important to create a form of specialization within the industry?
And I'm going to interject really quick. We have some time left. However, I am going to end our official panel discussion with that and with the acknowledgement that this is a series and there will be more of these. They're new technology techniques. Its goal is to do 3 panel discussions every semester. We have 2 more scheduled. One is on computation and one is on, it was previously going to be animation, but we switched that to visualization as we found some very interesting parallels between animation and visualization. So look forward to those. And also, please, everyone, watch out for these petitions, these chances to give us feedback that I'll be sending out. Those are your direct ability to say, we want more of this. We would like to see a demonstration of this. We would like to have a workshop of this. And I told everyone here, panels, everyone's like, I want to show something, right? Please let me. And I said, no, I'm sorry. And I am embracing the aspect of FOMO. So I'm going to say thank you to everyone here. You guys all were amazing. We will do more of these. We still have some time left, 10 minutes. So at this point, everyone can say their goodbyes. You guys can have a conversation if you want. It's up to you. Again, thank you, everyone. I'll be here for another 10 minutes.